let me tell you a little bit about how the League is involved with, how we got involved with this project. First of all, you need to know a little bit about the League. The League of Women Voters is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. At the 2021 New York State League Convention, delegates unanimously passed a climate change emergency resolution, making the reduction of global warming a New York State League priority. The League is pleased to partner with Drawdown East End to make that resolve move forward. A lot of what I am going to say, you've heard and you may already know, but it all is important to hear again, I think. We all want a healthier planet, a place that will continue on for generations to come. As a Drawdown Festival participant, you already know that carbon emissions affect the planet significantly, causing global warming and ultimately climate change that brings about catastrophic consequences such as tropical storms, wildfires, severe droughts, melting of polar ice caps, heat waves, rising sea levels, and the disturbance of animal natural habitats. But did you know that the UN has found that 2/3 of all greenhouse gases originate from decisions made on the household level? Our decisions can help rapidly transform our economies and lifestyles off fossil fuels and on to clean and green. Our actions matter. In order to reverse global warming, we must significantly reduce our emissions by relying on already well-developed technologies such as wind, solar, and electricity that do not require the use of fossil fuels. Change doesn't come naturally to us as humans, but it becomes easier when individuals or small groups of people concentrate on their own personal change and share their accomplishments with others. Just look at the success of Carbon Crew project as it begins to sweep across the country. CREW, C-R-E-W, as you learned earlier today, is the acronym for Carbon Reduction for Earth Well-Being. Change is possible once you understand that you must be part of the solution. Change doesn't need to feel overwhelming. Take small steps and make a plan. Your first step should be to join a Carbon Crew and learn how to develop your personal carbon action plan. You'll be surprised how easy it can be to make changes. It's easy to get involved. The reading is easy. The personal interactions are inspiring. The homework is enlightening. The time commitment for meetings is manageable. And best of all, it's fun and you'll be making a difference. Your next step is to gather more tools to help you learn to change. I hope this session of the festival, Electrify Everything, will give you some additional tools so you can start to make substantive changes. Our panel is anxious to share their knowledge, so let's begin. Our three panelists are Krae Van Sickle, Lynn Arthur, and Steph Larson. Okay. Krae Van Sickle lobbied to establish the Community Preservation Fund that has raised $1 billion and saved 10,000 acres of land on the East End. He has participated directly in the conservation of hundreds of acres of land, including rare ocean moorland habitat. He is on the East Hampton Energy Sustainability Committee and is a co-founder of Drawdown East End. Krae, please get us started with an overview of Electrifying Everything.
Great, thanks, Susan. So, yeah, I just wanted to provide a little bit of an overview of what the sequence is for pursuing the idea of electrifying your various things in life that can help your overall personal carbon action plan. So to put it into context, there's the four sort of big things as individuals that we can achieve the biggest results with. Whoops. I need to back up here. I'm going to control it manually here. The four are your food choices, your consumption choices, your transportation choices, and your building and energy choices. And to give you a sort of sense of the scope of this, you know, if you look at this chart, this is the total end use sectors of the use of energy. Residential and transportation is huge. It's almost 50% of the total amount of end use energy that's consumed in the United States. This is the Energy Information Administration's graphic. So we're after some really big targets. This is probably the single biggest thing that you can do, and in many ways the most accessible thing, in addition to food. I mean, food consumption and these choices are all things that are really readily accessible and are the kind of things that you would do in the Carbon Crew program. So to break down what your residential use is, you can see that space heating and water heating represent a very large portion of it, and most of the rest of what are in the smaller slivers of the pie chart are things that are already using electric. Now, most people don't have electric space heating and don't have electric water heating. So those are things that we can talk about how we can approach converting. And then with regard to transportation, this graphic's a little bit too busy, but basically it's just saying that most of the trips that we take, obviously, if we're just driving around or traveling around our neighborhoods, we're mostly in our cars. And that even when we go for travel on holiday trips, it's mostly by land. And so it's mostly by motor vehicle. So that just gives us a little context for where we're trying to electrify is clearly we're trying to electrify our automobiles. So this is the sequence that I mentioned. The first step is to green your source of electricity. And we'll go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. And then we have Lynn and Steph who are able to get into even more detail about a few of these different subtopics. But the first thing is to make sure that you're getting renewable energy, basically. And then the second part is to convert, in terms of the ranking of priorities, convert your transportation to electric, which is a fairly straightforward thing. Reducing your demand for electric in the home as much as possible increases our utilization of the solar panels, which is what the main two choices are for greening your electricity. One is solar panels, and the other is buying green energy on your electric bill, which you can do to a somewhat limited extent out here, but you can do it. So in order not to pay more on your electric bill, if you're buying green energy, or in order to utilize the full extent of your solar panel capacity, which is usually limited by your roof size, you want to make what you're demanding from that energy source as efficient as possible. And then converting heat to electric is a huge step. Converting hot water to electric or solar thermal, or a combination. Solar thermal is not very common out here at all, but it is used a lot all over the world. I think in Israel, for instance, 85% of the hot water is from solar thermal. And then, you know, much lesser of importance, but you can convert your cooking from, like, say, gas to electric, or to induction, and then pool heaters and salt and thermal hot water can also be used for pool heaters too. So anyway, let's go into these a little bit more detail. Obviously, the first, the best way to create a green energy source for your personal home and consumption is to get solar photovoltaic panels. They save you a tremendous amount of money if your roof is appropriate for solar panels. We'll go in, you know, Lynn will probably go into more depth with that. It has everything to do with whether you have appropriate exposure to the sun, if you can or cannot reasonably install solar panels, and whether it makes sense economically to do that. There are what are called ESCOs, and they basically are your electric bill is divided between the source of the energy that you are using, and the delivery charges, which have to do with the power lines and so forth. You pay for the capacity for building those power lines, and you pay for the energy that you use. You can, throughout the most of the United States and New York for sure, choose the energy provider that you want to have, for the fact that they generate the energy with renewable sources like hydroelectric or wind or solar in a more utility scale way. There are very limited options here. I do have a few resources that are in the next slide. And then, whoops, hold on a second, sorry, I touched it too soon. There are other technologies for getting green energy on a personal level, but they're not really that applicable out here, like wind, for instance. But very rarely would that be applicable for you out here. So as I mentioned, solar really has to do with whether you have good solar exposure. This is my house out in Montauk, where I have great solar exposure and great panels. And this is an example of a place that's in the woods in Amagansett North, where they don't have such good exposure. So I can have solar panels. This person would probably have to try to buy green energy. The house I'm sitting in now, I don't have good solar exposure, so I do have a green energy provider on my utility bill through LIPA and PSEG. These are the few energy providers for renewable energy that you can get on your electric bill. Lynn can probably tell you more about what's coming down the pike. There probably are going to be more options as we go into the future. The one that I use is Community Energy Inc. It's not like just an online process. I don't think, when I signed up, it was a little bit less automated than it is now. It sometimes takes a little bit of effort to get through to these people, and you usually have to set up an account with your PSEG account and then link the two. And it requires some dedication. But I've been doing it for, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 years. I don't know, maybe not that long, but I live in a way where I say, wow, I have solar on my mother's house out in Montauk, and I have green energy here. So I've been able to really, not be using fossil fuel for my electrification, which is very good. You can go to Community Power Long Island, and they have a fuel cell option, which is not as green. And then Clean Choice Energy is a very aggressive group, but I'm not sure they serve all of Long Island. If you're not right out here at the East End, they may be good, they may be a provider for you. Converting transportation to electric is fairly straightforward. There's a lot of great electric cars, more and more all the time. I've had electric cars for many, many years. There's no sacrifice in getting an electric car. There are some people who have range anxiety. If that's true, my wife has a Prius Prime, and there are other plug-in hybrids that for most of your local trips will be 100% battery powered. But if you go on a longer trip, you can also make sure that you can get gasoline if you're finding that it's hard to find a charging station. Reducing your demand for electric as much as possible. Again, to utilize the limited roof space that you might have for solar, or to reduce the cost of your green energy provider. I should back up and say the green energy provider that I am now using costs me more than the regular energy. There's an added bill that LIPA puts on top of that, which is the real problem. That's what we're trying to get, because in fact, there's no reason why it shouldn't be less. But again, Lynn may address some of that. So anyway, so you want to reduce your demand, and the first step to do that with, excuse me, is to do a home energy audit. And they basically come in and they look for insulation that you could enhance. Very important is all these air leaks that are on windows and doors and weather stripping. If you're going to convert your heating system and your cooling system to electric, you want to make sure that you're not losing all of that heat and cool and energy out the windows and doors. So the first step is to do this energy audit. They're free. I'll give you some resources about that. Obviously, Energy Star appliances, LED lighting, things like your pool pump pull a huge amount of electricity. You can get variable speed pool pumps. There are even incentives for getting a lot of this stuff that you can find on PSEG. This is, if you want to get an energy audit in East Hampton, there's Energize East Hampton. It's a website, and they will connect you with a provider. Lynn will probably tell you about the new Sustainable Southampton website, which is the equivalent for getting these kinds of energy audit resources in Southampton. And then, converting your home space heating to electric is basically about heat pumps. There are two types currently. There's geothermal and air-to-air split systems. Geothermal is basically taking the temperature that's consistently about 55 degrees in the ground, and through the use of refrigerant gases, which is a little complicated, they basically, if it's hotter than that in the summer outside, then the cool temperature of the ground helps to transfer that cool temperature into the house. And if it's warmer, did I say that? If it's cold outside, then you use the warmer heat that's in the ground to heat your house. The new systems that are really, I think, winning a lot of the day these days are these split systems. You may have seen this thing that's on the right mounted on walls. I have one over there. I have 5 of them throughout my houses. They work like a charm. They work down to sub-zero temperatures these days. They're remote controlled. They also have bigger units that have multiple, heating and cooling. They both heat and cool. And these are the ones that are recessed into the ceilings. This is sort of what it looks like when it's recessed in the ceiling. So you don't have to have boxes on your walls anymore. And those are really great. They're a game changer in terms of our ability to convert our heat to a green source of energy. And then switching hot water to electricity is also usually, at this point, a heat pump. You can use solar thermal, as I say, in much of the rest of the world, in Latin America and Israel. People use solar thermal. It's not that common here. It's a very simple technology. Sometimes I've heard that if you have the roof space, it's better to use the solar PV because it actually generates more power per square foot than the solar thermal. But maybe somebody else can opine about that. This is just a graphic of how it works. It's got to do with compression of refrigerant gases that are absorbing and dispensing of the temperature gradient from the air or from the water, as the case may be. These are the solar thermal hot water systems, what they look like. They don't have to have that big tank up there, but a lot of them do, and especially in other parts of the world. And then, once you're on a roll here, you can switch to either conventional electric or induction, which is a very high-tech but accessible, saves you a lot of money, extremely efficient induction. Doesn't, there's no hot plate on the surface, so you can't burn yourself. It's easy to clean. And then, this is a little bit of an extreme example, but converting your pool heaters, if you have a pool heater, uses an enormous amount of energy. So if you can do anything possible to supplement or reduce the amount of energy that you use for your pool heater, it would definitely be an important step if you have a pool. So that's about it. That's where we're going after these two huge sectors here, residential and transportation. And if we, if you are able to take some of those steps, you'll be making a big difference towards reducing your emissions by that 50% by 2030. So that's about it for me. Hand it back to you, Susan, to whomever else is next on the agenda.
Our next speaker, Lynn Arthur, founder of Peak Power Long Island, provides consulting services to municipal governments relating to renewable energy technologies. Her not-for-profit company fills a gap between government and the adoption of technologies needed to reduce our carbon footprint while improving the resiliency of our homes. Lynn has developed a public information outreach campaign focusing on affordable energy, solar, and clean heating and cooling options for Southampton Town, some of which she'll share with us today. Lynn, welcome.
Thank you. So what can you do? That's the theme for this event. And what I'm going to talk about are really just two things. And thank you, Krae, by the way. Krae, you actually explained geothermal pretty well. So I'm not going to spend as much time as I was planning to, but I'm going to fly through these slides and get to the end where people can sign up. So I'm going to talk about heating and cooling and also about how you can generate your own electricity cost effectively. You've seen this chart already once. You know, next to transportation, heating and cooling is right there. Why geothermal should be considered? I mean, as Krae said, there's multiple ways you can install various heat pump technologies, but geothermal is clearly the most efficient and the most, will contribute the largest towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And oh, by the way, isn't that the objective? So it'll increase your home value, you'll save money, and obviously it decreases your dependence on fossil fuels. Again, you saw this earlier, just want to reiterate that heating and cooling plus water heating accounts for more than 50% of the amount of energy a residential home uses. Another example of geothermal, this is a closed loop system that you're seeing. It's pumping fluid through the ground out here in the Hamptons. I just, by the way, retrofitted my own home with this, and I was stunned at the cost. Many homes that are, that have systems in their house that are, at least 20 years old. I mean, these systems are all candidate to be replaced. I had an old propane system. A lot of people have oil burners. If you have the ducting already in place, I'm sorry to say it's pretty much a no-brainer, because the cost of replacing with a conventional system versus with geothermal is the same. And the operating costs are so much less. And I'm going to show you that.
Hey, Lynn, people are saying, I don't think you can see the chat. People are saying in the chat that we can only see your first slide. So if you've been moving them, we can't see that. All I see is, what can you do? There we go. Now I can. Odd.
Gee, that's weird. Okay, so you see, here's the first slide.
Yep.
Here's the second. Okay. Okay, I went into screen show mode and I guess it didn't work.
Now it's working. It's working.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm not sure how it's coming across, but are you seeing my whole dashboard or just the PowerPoint?
We can see the whole thing. So we can see the how does it work slide, and then we can see the side, what's coming up, and we can see the top bar.
All right, well, I'm not quite sure, but I'm not going to spend the time to figure it out because I only have a few minutes left.
Slideshow.
Yeah, but no, that's what happened before the slideshow didn't work. Okay, so Krae did a really good job of explaining this. Just one more time, basically with geothermal, you're going to have a heat pump in your basement. It is attached to the venting system in your house. As in the summer, as the warm air in the house comes into the unit, because there's a fan that's circulating the air through the ducting system and into the unit. And then there's a loop inside the heat pump that is then transferring that warm air to another loop that's going into the ground, where that warm air is transferred onto into the fluid that goes into the ground, 6 feet down under the ground. It's 53 degrees, constant temperature. And basically through the loop, it's cooling the air and returning that into the house, where the air is then transferred into the fan is pushing it through the house. And in the winter, it's basically the system is reversed. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into specific details about how that works. The key thing to understand is that this coefficient of performance, the reason why geothermal is so efficient and so less costly is because it's matching 1 unit of electricity from the grid with 4 units of free energy from the earth, via this process that I just explained on the last chart. And this is, again, just an example of another alternative, which would be an open loop system. So the benefits of geothermal, it's got a long system life, longer than conventional systems. It has the best aesthetics. You don't have compressors. There's no exhaust pipe, to vent the burning of oil or gas, to outside your home. You can control the temperature precisely. It provides a high level of dehumidification. Out here, on the South Fork, humidity is a factor. Mold is a problem. So this is a great dehumidifier for your house. And oh, by the way, safety, completely, that's a great byproduct. There's no risk of carbon monoxide poisoning because you're not burning anything, and certainly no puffbacks. Financially, I'm going to show you this on another slide. The operating costs are so much less, and to buy a system, if you're doing new construction, which I'm going to show you, or you're replacing an existing system in a retrofit, which is what I have done, the costs are more or less the same. And the reason why the costs are the same is because there's so many benefits. There's so much tax incentives. There's rebates from the local utility. And here's an example. Here's a case study. I'm going to show you a new construction, 2,500 square foot home. I think this home is in Hampton Bays. I know it's definitely west of the canal. I think it's a 4-bedroom house. But basically what you see on here is this, and this is a few years old. The net cost after rebate, $26,000, was the same cost as a conventional system. And that's due to all those rebates and tax incentives that I said earlier. So here's the plan for the house. There's a picture of the house. And oh, by the way, this is the home of a colleague of mine, Jerry Anthony, who's also on the sustainability committee. And here are the operating costs for that 4,500 square foot space. You see the ground source heat pump, $962 a year. What they mean by resistance is if he had installed baseboard heaters, which run on electricity, by the way, the coefficient of performance is 1:1, so very expensive. Air source heat pumps, a little bit less, well, actually half the cost, natural gas, and a propane system. You're looking at the column all the way to the right. In his case, he also installed a 1,200 kW solar array on his roof, and after a year's worth of data, he's net zero, which is really, that's the target. The target is to get your house as close to net zero as possible. So in the couple minutes I have remaining, just going to say, here's another example of a case study. And again, in the time remaining, doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about how solar works, because at this point it's been around for about 10 years and pretty much everybody knows that. But here's a case study, 10,000 square foot, a 10K system. Cost in 2017 project was $41,000. After all the rebates and tax incentives, out of pocket would have been $23,000. Entire project was financed with a New York State Smart Energy loan at 3.49% over a fixed 15-year fixed rate. This homeowner got $178 a month was their cost, and the PSEG bill went from $200 a month to $12. So this household was net positive on day one. And if you look at the cost of running that solar system over its life, now solar systems, the panels are warranted bumper to bumper, typically for 25 years, but they last longer than that. So in this case, a 30-year analysis shows that the average cost of electricity in that particular house, which is 1,800 square foot, it was $200 a month. And if that homeowner had done nothing, as you know, PSEG rates have gone up between 2 and 2.5% every year since 2017, except this year they're going up 4.5%. It was just in Newsday last week, if you happen to read that article by Mark Harrington, which I recommend you do read. But over 30 years, the rates are going to go up somewhere between 2 and 5%. So that's the orange and the yellow lines. Whereas this homeowner has fixed their cost of electricity by putting solar on their roof and financing it with a New York State loan. Their cost of the loan plus their PSEG bill is now $192 a month for 15 years. And then that goes down to $14 a month after 15 years when the loan is paid off. So they have saved over the life of this project somewhere around, I would say more like $80,000 to $120,000 a year. And that's it. So finally, what I want to say is this is a program that's all of what you've seen here from me today will be available on the town's sustainablesouthamptonny.com website, which will be launched sometime in the next, definitely in the month of February, hopefully in 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. But there are 6 programs. And there's a lot of free stuff, free energy audits like Krae had mentioned at the Energize East Hampton website. We have information about battery storage, about a demand response program, about geothermal. We offer free home assessments. You'll get a proposal for geothermal or air source heat pump if that's appropriate. And you'll get deliverables similar to what you saw me present earlier, a view of what it would cost for you to replace your system, what the operating costs would be, et cetera, et cetera. If you can't wait, there's my email address. But if you go to this website in about a month's time, everything will be available to you there. And we are also planning a geothermal webinar where it will be explained in at least an hour time on February 17th at 7 o'clock. So thank you so much. And I'm going to now turn it over to Stephanie, who's going to talk about transportation.
Let me just give you a quick introduction to Steph Larson. She is a clean transportation and solar advocate with a talent for distilling the complex into easy to understand actions. Steph has worked with organizations like Solar United Neighbors and the Sierra Club. She holds degrees in geology and geography. She's originally from Wisconsin, currently lives in northern New York on Lake Champlain with her family, and raises yaks in her spare time. Steph, what do you have to tell us about transportation?
Sure, transportation. So hi, everyone. My name is Steph Larson. As Susan said, thank you for that introduction. She, her pronouns. I live in northern New York on ancestral Ganikahaga land. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about clean transportation, and I am going to start with an apology. I thought that I had a really slick presentation, and it's not on this computer, so my apologies. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about transportation because, as both Lynn and Krae pointed out, transportation is one of the biggest sectors for carbon pollution these days. It has eclipsed coal-powered plants and basically anything else. So transportation is the new focus on how to reduce our carbon pollution. And before we get too far into it, I do want to say that it can feel, again, as other presenters have pointed out, a little overwhelming that like I'm one person and what can I do? And while the answer is a lot, it also is incumbent upon all of us to not just change our own actions, but also to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and advocacy for changing the systems in which we live in. I don't know if this were a meeting, I would have everybody raise their hand if they've seen Look Up, which is the new movie. But after Look Up came out, Leonardo DiCaprio and Greenpeace put out a statement saying that it's not just about telling people to change their light bulbs or buy a hybrid car anymore. This disaster, climate change, has grown beyond the choices that individuals can make. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't make good choices. It means that, and he goes on, it's now about industries and governments taking decisive large-scale action. So, okay, again, what can you do? So, number one, I would say that, when people think about electrifying transportation, almost everybody that I talk to immediately jumps to, well, I can't afford an electric car, or what about electric cars, you know? And number one, the infrastructure bill that already passed Congress and has been signed into law by President Biden does have a lot of interesting things for clean transportation, including infrastructure for charging. Krae mentioned the idea of, you know, anxiety around range. You know, am I going to get where I want to go with the battery that I have? And if I can't, then do I need to charge, and how long does that take? Technology is growing leaps and bounds on that bit, so that it is possible that very soon we will have cars that can charge in the time it takes to stop at a gas station, run to the restroom, grab a snack, come back to your car, it's all charged. So if that were the case, we don't have problems. But, you know, let's say you just got a new car or a different car 5 years ago. Maybe it doesn't make sense for you to get an electric car right now. So what else can we do in terms of electrifying transportation? Well, we can push for better fuel efficiency standards and push for companies to have bigger electric fleets, and to require that they pursue electrification of their fleets. When I was with Sierra Club, I did a very successful corporate accountability campaign with targeting Uber and Lyft. And it didn't actually take a lot of pressure for us to convince them that they should make an announcement that they were going to try to have their fleet of vehicles electrified by 2030 and incentivize their drivers to get electric. So that's awesome. I think what people often forget when we talk about clean transportation, and especially electrified transportation, is it's not just light duty vehicles. That accounts for a ton of the carbon pollution in this country. But think about when you drive on the highway, how many semi-trucks are you seeing? How many box trucks and freight trucks are we seeing? And it costs consumers nothing to demand that the trucking industry stop using dirty trucks when hauling freight from one place to another. And an added bonus to that is that the communities most impacted by freight transportation are low-income communities and communities of color, especially in urban areas where big highways roll right through those neighborhoods rather purposefully. And then, you know, those communities then we see have higher rates of asthma and other airborne pollution related diseases. So don't forget that heavy duty freight vehicles also need to have better fuel efficiency standards, and they're making tons of progress as well on electrified hauling.
Steph,
yep.
Excuse me, Steph. Fascinating, and we'd love to go on, and we could spend many, many, many more minutes, but we are out of our time, and so I thank you very much, and sorry to cut you short, but we are part of a bigger program here, so we do need to move on. Thank you very much for sharing with us. I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Krae Van Sickle, Lynn Arthur, and Steph Larson, for sharing with us and teaching us how to electrify everything. I'd also like to thank our audience for attending and remind everyone that your actions matter. You must be part of the solution. And one way to be part of that solution is to join a carbon crew.